For the 4th season of the Overwatch League, the London Spitfire have chosen a new approach to roster building, promoting general manager Ysabel Noukky Müller from their academy roster, the British Hurricane. Alongside her, 5 more players were promoted. However, Noukky emphasizes in this interview that it wasn't due to nepotism were brought up, but instead a thorough process that each player had to go through. Therefore, in this interview, we talk about this process, and we talk about the individual character of this team, who they are as people, as well as a unit. Furthermore, we talk about other promising European talent, such as the controversial figure of Provide, also known as Slur. We talk about which players from the British Hurricane didn't arrive in the Overwatch League, such as Jofi and Dannedd. Finally, we talk about hopes and dreams coming into the 2021 season and where the Spitfire wants to land. So without further ado, we give you the general manager of the London Spitfire, Ysabel Noukky Müller. Right. How much comparing does go on between the seasons? Like, do the coaches sometimes like look over the pond and just like look at the strategies that are being played, or are they looking to Korea or even China in that regards? Like, how much cross-pollination of ideas happening outside of Gauntlet and Showdown?
Many. We have coaches that watch every part of Contenders basically regularly. So there's always like intake from different scenes, from different game types or like play styles, and then basically get all these ideas together, try something out in the team, and then see like what play style fits you best and what you think has the highest skill ceiling for you, because just like straight copying Korean playstyle doesn't necessarily work in like the Western playstyle and like the other way around.
Now, do you, I mean, this story of Bok 1 is sort of legendary, as like you usually have like 17-year-olds till 19-year-olds that can barely cook water without setting the kitchen on fire. And then on the other side, you had a guy that literally saved lives. So on the other side of the spectrum of responsibility. Do you still keep in contact with Bok every once in a while?
And we still have him on our Discord server. Like he peeks in there every once in a while. Definitely not as much the last year, since like we basically changed the whole squad because he was more attached like to the old players, of course. But we're still in contact with like all the old people through our Discord server, and like sometimes just post memes or something, or whenever like we see something funny, remember Bok. We even have an emote of him. Like we have a Bok Lair emote.
Right, makes sense. Now, looking at that time at that roster, and I think Jofi was one of the 2018 late 2018 hires, then into 2020. When he left you guys, I felt like, or I recall the Reddit thread going, "Oh, he's probably outbound, like really good main support," and then him just not going anywhere. So what happened there with Jofi?
It's really hard to talk about this topic because, of course, it's like there's like so many factors that can go into a player being let go from a team. It's not necessarily always performance. That's like what I like to point out. It's not always just because he's like somebody is overperforming, underperforming, whatever. It doesn't mean like they're on a team forever. There is also like I said earlier, there's attitude that goes into it. There's like how you self-reflect, how you practice, like how much effort you put in. There can be rubbing points in teams where like people put in more or less effort. There can be rubbing points of personality. There can be rubbing points of like motivational issues and whatever. Like there's so much more going into a team than just like how they perform in online matches, how they perform on stage. And so every time like when it goes to a why doesn't this person get picked up? Why doesn't that person get picked up? Like I touched on it like briefly with Hafi, where he like had a good performance like all year, and then like doesn't get picked up because of like rumors, because of like other issues that might be happening. So it's not always as black and white as like community perception is. I can't like go into like super hard detail on it though.
For sure.
Out of respect for like, of course, the player too.
In terms of like player atmosphere in the new London Spitfire, and as we move into the topic of London Spitfire, what is the atmosphere, the general atmosphere like? Because, for instance, we had Brad on, and from the Atlanta Rain, and he was really high on having a group of basically grinders who are very eager to work a lot and have sort of like the same or similar drive as everyone else. You feel you're pretty balanced there, and to what extent does that work for you?
Oh yeah, I definitely feel like everybody in the team is like highly motivated to prove themselves, which is a really good trait to have in a team environment. How I like to describe our team environment between coaches and players is we like to have a really collaborative environment, because we're not big big on the like very top down coaching style that other teams might be. Since like the players play this pretty professionally, and the players are experts at their roles, of course, and like we try to treat them as those experts on their roles. So we rely on players to give us feedback about possibilities of strats, give us like feedback on like, hey, we want to try this and this. Do you think this works? How do you see you role in this composition? Do you think you can like improve on this? Do you think you can like position like that, etc.? And so we like to create an environment between players and coaches that is like working on a solution together, rather than like having the top-down view of like coaches just presenting a solution, you know. And we have players that are really smart. I think Justin said it on Twitter like back a few weeks ago, where he's like, this is the smartest players I've worked with so far, and that enables us to have like this very collaborative environment and like working towards the same goal together as a team.
Right. Now, before we go into the specific makeup of the team, I also want to hone in on something personal to you, because, I mean, even without behind-the-scenes knowledge, I think everyone that has been in the Overwatch scene is pretty aware of a lot of people that are well-known characters in the Overwatch League, like casters and players, and also streamers to a point, constantly suggesting you for an Overwatch League GM position. And, I mean, you finally reaching that point came relatively late in comparison to the amount of hype you got around that. Did you interview anywhere else beforehand? Was that a frustrating process? And what did it feel like eventually actually ending up as an Overwatch League GM proper with London Spitfire?
It's a really hard story to tell, because it was like so many frustration points over the years. So in season 1, I was really eager to get into Overwatch League. Like I reached out to people I knew were like getting into it as like a team manager first. So I reached out to GM, say, are you looking for a team manager? Can I send you my resume? And like send out so many resumes over that time, but didn't get an interview for the first season. Second season comes around, and I like try to reach out to additional teams and to like the extension teams. I got an interview with Washington back then. Had a call with their like upper management, and yeah, basically just like had one interview, and then it fell through again. And at that point, I was like also on the verge of like being with Cloud9 for 2 years, and them like offering like having me more involved in everything. So I was weighing. Of course, I was like, this was the point where we got into negotiations of like what I do with Cloud9, because of course, like I notified them, hey, I have this interview with Washington. And it was basically weighing against like, do I stay in Cloud9 do general esports things, or do I like try to pursue this a tiny bit more? And I ended up like deciding for myself, hey, this is really frustrating just staying in Overwatch. I wanna be in esports. I wanna be like, I always wanted to be somebody that is like endemic to esports, and like that knows many roles, and that like learns like everything about the scene that I can. And so I was like, I have more chances doing that and being like that person when I'm staying Cloud9, and when I don't like only pursue like Overwatch League GMs or like being an Overwatch League GM. So I basically just settled with the idea. And so season 3 was like, I didn't even pursue anything. Like I just stayed where I am with Cloud9, like learned new games, learned new techniques in team management, like learned so much stuff here about being a good manager. And then once this season rolled around and like the end of season 3 approached, Jack basically reached out, not really reached out to me, but we were talking about like what the future of the team is, and like that Robin is going to move on from it, and that they want to like put in a European roster. And Jack literally said in chat, if we go for a European roster, Noukky is going to be GM. Like that was it. Because I had like this track record with Hurricane, and so I was like, okay, I guess it's settled now. Like I didn't even say anything about it. It was done. So I was like, yeah, cool. I guess I finally reached my goal of like being a general manager in Overwatch League and like doing things my way there, rather than like what I've seen over the years from other GMs. So I was really overwhelmed and happy about it.
But you did pitch the idea of a European team prior to this point. Right?
Oh yeah, I did pitch the idea of a European team in seasons 3 when we basically rebuilt the whole roster. We were talking about it briefly. I was like trying to get a pitch going while Jack was still like in negotiations with other people, like with the coaches and like Robin still. So it was kind of I talked to him about it at Worlds with League of Legends, like briefly, and then like tried to get a pitch together as fast as I can. But he was like too far in negotiations already with like the coaches for the Korean roster. So it was more of a final attempt to jump into the wedding and crash it, but it didn't happen. Like it couldn't. So for the next year, I had like more time to put something together and had more time like to prove like why I think the European roster is good to have for us as an org and like for the scene itself. So that's when I succeeded in my attempts.
Did you think your track records contributed towards like your upper management sort of thinking, oh, I mean, kind of got the best European team, don't we?
Maybe a tiny bit.
All right. So the European org is decided upon. Interestingly, it isn't a purely European org in the end. And namely, the most interesting part is that it isn't a European coach. So you ended up with Reprize. Is he currently in the US? And how did he end up with you guys?
Yeah, he's currently in the US. He's coaching from East Coast side of things. How he came to be is very interesting because he wasn't on my radar at the start when I was trying to build the roster. I was like talking to some European coaches before, and it was like I have to go out of the circle a tiny bit with this one. It's a bit longer story. So at that time, I was still in charge of Cloud9 Blue, our Valorant team, and recruited Chu for them as a head coach, former coach of Envy in Overwatch. And I talked with him about recruiting coaches for Cloud9 White, which is our female Valorant team. And the name Reprize came up, of course, because like he worked with Reprize prior. Reprize was an Overwatch League coach before, and like we just basically bounced names around. And so I was like, yeah, Reprize. And I wanted to interview him for Cloud9 White mainly.
Interesting.
And of course I was still like looking at like coaches for Overwatch League, but it wasn't like my main approach to him. So I was sliding in DMs being like, hey, I'm currently recruiting coaches for like 2 projects, and I wanted to know if he's like interested in either Cloud9 White or Overwatch League. Because I got recommendations from him. I talked to Packing a tiny bit about him. Of course, like doing my research before I like message people and try to get them to interview with me. And in our interview, we basically like interviewed for both. Like I like to do very general interviews, not like very in-depth, like in-game knowledge interviews, but like more with head coaches. I look more for like how he sets up team culture, how organized is he, like how good is he with like people, how does he approach problems, etc. That's like more of what I'm looking in a head coach than what I'm looking into like assistant coaches, for example, where I'm more like game focused with them. And so we resonated on a really deep level when it comes to like how we want our players to approach the game and how we want their attitudes to be towards improvement and how we like to structure teams and like build team culture. And so it was kind of a natural fit for both of us, because he also like heard good things about me as a general manager and how involved I am into my teams, and that I'm not like just sitting there being like very top down and like how I manage my teams. And yeah, it was basically like we talked in an interview, and then I was like, yeah, I think that's a really good fit for the Overwatch League team rather than the Cloud9 White team. And so I offered him that spot eventually.
Okay. Was he surprised being also interviewed for Overwatch stuff?
Kinda. It was like I basically approached him for both. So it was like more like a general interview of like, yeah, I want to see how you're doing, how you are, like what your approach is to coaching.
Interesting, yeah. So the practice arrangements, generally speaking, I mean, it's a global pandemic. We got to make do somehow, right? As you mentioned, your head coach is in North America, possibly. I think, isn't Reprize with someone, living with someone in the Overwatch League as well?
He's living with his family currently.
Oh, okay. I thought there was some other living arrangement. Maybe
I cannot speak on like.
Yeah, no. Of course not. I'm just
involved as a general manager, but I don't know who's living like with who.
I thought he was. I thought he was living with someone notable in the Overwatch League still from the Valiant days or something. But that is probably also true for every other member of the London Spitfire. So, is there any special ways how you keep up like a work structure? Do you have the players always have their cameras on, or how do you make sure the lessons receive the players, and how do you make sure they pay attention as well?
That's a really good question. We don't really have like a mandatory like camera kind of policy or something. We always like get them in early, like hang out with them when they warm up. And what I see coaches do or like to do is like rotate reviews a tiny bit. So sometimes we would like assign them homework, and then people would present their findings in a VOD review.
The players as well.
The players, yeah,
yes?
definitely.
Yeah, okay. Sweet.
Rotate players doing like their sides of VOD review or like their assignments that they had over the weekend. So that's always a very fun thing to do. And then of course we have like a few like lesser serious like game nights sometimes, or just like team bonding, team building kind of things that we do. It's of course always really hard to grasp like who's paying attention at that point, who's more involved, who's less involved. But the coaches are doing a really good job like to rotate input from players and like ask them specific questions and get everybody on the same page. And as I mentioned earlier, every player is like really involved developing the strategy. So
okay. Now, I mean, building this roster in that part was probably not as challenging because you already had sort of like this core of players that you just had to promote. Now, as challenging as promoting players is, it's also cutting players that have been with you for a long time, but don't make it into the final Overwatch League roster. Now, it therefore also doesn't help when a player has a reputation because they're really flashy or they're generally like considered to be a good player. And here I'm slowly inching towards the topic of Dannedd, of course. Now, he had been with you for a long time, and in the end didn't make the final roster. And I suppose this move also has to be seen in the context of you signing Blasé. So can you illuminate this entire thought process behind that here?
Oh yeah, definitely. First of all, I have to say that every player on Hurricane had as fair of a chance as every other player that we trialed. So we didn't do we definitely want to pick up XYZ player and then build around that. We definitely try to give everybody the fairest chance that we can. So we had a huge set of tryouts. We did like in-houses for the longest amount of time and like putting everybody against each other. Of course, like it developed pretty quickly. Like that, of course, like a core from Hurricane is something that is like superior to like putting together like random players. But it was definitely not like nobody had like a bigger opportunity than the other person, especially like DPS players. Because we wanted to see, like, of course, we wanted to go into Overwatch League with the best roster that we can. So it would be foolish to just flat out give everybody give Hurricane players like a beneficial treatment or something. And yeah, what's the same for Dannedd? Dannedd had as fair of a shot as Blasé at it. We checked our boxes that we do in tryouts, which is like, of course, in-game mechanics, which I touched on like 20,000 times now, like player attitude towards improvement, how they receive feedback, how they give feedback to other players, like how they are in team environments and stuff. And Blasé just stood out a tiny bit more. That's literally the gist of it.
Mm-hmm. Can you explain to viewers and readers what kind of a core you've promoted there? Like those 5 guys, what are their personalities like individually, and what is their, I suppose, personality as a group?
So they have personalities that kind of add up to each other. Like Hadi is a very like passionate person, even though he doesn't sound like it in interviews and like in videos that we do, because he's like very monotone most of the time. He's like very passionate about like improvements and like about like certain topics. He can get heated at times, but it's like he's like a natural leader basically, where he is like, he has opinions and he doesn't shy down from standing up for those opinions. Reaper is Finnish. I don't know how best to describe
I mean, I already have a perfect picture in mind, unironically, like,
he's very laid back. He's very like very quiet usually. If he contributes something, it's either something super ridiculous or it's like very smart. So he has a really good balance of that. And then the Danish squad basically is more vocal. Like they know what they can contribute, and they are the people that you can like ask questions and they give like very, very good answers. They don't shy down of like most of the squad doesn't shy down from like putting up their opinion and like discussing things with other players and like standing their ground when it comes to like changes, etc. So we have like a very dynamic squad that like adds up on each other very nicely.
What about SparkR? Because like that's an interesting pickup. And it's interesting because, like, for those who don't know, SparkR will only turn 18 by June 10th, I believe, which is, I believe, already 2 stages in, if I have my time line correctly. Now, the season start worked a little bit in your favor in that regard. Like, initially, it would have just been like before the cutoff that was June 15th last time. Now it's not as significant into the season. It would have been like 3rd stage under regular season scheduling that starts in February. So would you have made that signing had the schedule been different? And what kind of a player is SparkR?
Would I have made the signing? Yes, I would have always made the signing as soon as he's eligible to get signed, because SparkR has been around the Hurricane squad since he's 15, like since he's 15, becoming 16 that year, and we put much work in like his development, and we deeply believe that he's one of the standout players that the Overwatch League can have this season, even though he will have like very short playtime. And DPS spots are always like very contested, so we have like have faith in him to be like one of the best players in the Overwatch League, like similar to Capster, when we like want to draw a comparison to other European players.
Yeah.
So that's why the signing was basically like we wanted to sign him no matter what. Like even getting him signed up for Spitfire was one of the strong points basically of that. He's a player that is really driven to improvement. Like he has a big form of self-reflection. He always like looks what's from other people by himself. He is like a super flexible player. Like he doesn't only play hit scan, he also plays things like Mei, things like Echo, even like some different roles. Like I think he started out as an Ana player, like back when he started playing the game. So we just think he's like one of the prodigies that has like a super high potential, being a good Overwatch League player for years to.
Right. Now, someone that kind of came, I mean, it's sort of in an unfair position because like either the British Hurricane people being moved up. Okay, that's a recognizable unit. Then you have Blasé and Shax, who are like Overwatch League players. It's one that slips through the mind cracks, if you want, even though it's not a forgettable player. So can you talk a little bit about Hybrid?
Oh, of course, yeah. Hybrid was one of the standout players in trials. First of all, because of his like, I kind of just sound like a broken record with that, like, his attitude to improvement kind of thing, but it's just something that we look for so much. He has a really solid hit scan. Like he filled roles pretty nicely that we needed him to fill for this roster. He is improving rapidly playing with us and like playing against Overwatch League teams, and he found his place in the squad pretty nicely too. So it was just a general really good fit for us and for what we were looking for in like our 7th player.
Right. Like
6/7th player, depending on like when SparkR is.
Now, of course, you also signed one of the like Europe's possibly greatest exports. How long did it take you to hear of the Valiant news, pick up the phone, and like get that trade going for Shax?
I was one of the first people, I think, because Packing actually reached out to us before the news got dropped. Basically, as soon as he heard it, he reached out, I think, to many different orgs, saying, "Hey, we have this in this situation. We might have players like coming up that are free. Can you give them a home?" Because he was really eager to get his players under different contracts. He was very eager to get his players to different teams just so they can like stay in the Overwatch League and they can stay making a living in esports. So he approached me via DM. Like I asked him a few questions about like how it's gonna work and like how he sees like this whole thing unfold. And then I basically immediately went to my Google Sheets, did a really nice calculation for Jack, and did a small write up about how I think Shax would be a great addition to the roster. And we knew that that Kai would have been heavily contested,
right?
So we rather opted for the pickup that we could like afford, if you want to say it like that. That also would have been a great upgrade for us. So it was basically a no-brainer to go to Jack and like argue for it. And as I said earlier, as long as I make a good case, Jack usually lets me have my way.
Did Packing suggest anyone else outside of Shax?
I mean, he basically came to us with like, we have a few players to be picked up, and I specifically asked about like the players that I was interested in more than anything. So I'm guessing that he approached other teams with like a similar approach. So.
Right, makes sense. Yeah. Would you have considered even like, let's say, a Dreamer, a Rain, someone like those players who are probably like fluent in English to a decent degree that they can communicate in Overwatch and can work in a roster like this?
If I'm gonna be honest, we wanted to have Hurricane. We wanted to have London Spitfire as a Western team, and we wanted to really heavily focus on European talent. And so, while I think they are really good players, it was just better for us to stick with our guns for that kind of matter, just because I wasn't sure if I can like provide them what they needed, or like provide them what they need to be like a stable player in the Overwatch League.
Right. So someone that sort of fits both patterns and at the same time is very controversial is a player that was signed to the Valiant once and then wasn't anymore because things were found out about them in the past. And he goes now by Provide, used to be Slur, and he's now eligible to be picked up. And it's a British bloke, so is that someone that is interesting for either Hurricane or London Spitfire?
Definitely. He was interesting for us actually in 2019 or 2020 when we had like the backline changes. Like when we were looking to basically before we picked up Calyx, he was one of the players that we trialed and that we were heavily interested in, even though he was like a flex support main. We asked him to give like main support a shot because we saw like big potential in him to be a good player, like overall a good support player. With the meta back then being like very flexible, not like super hard Lucio focused, we saw a good chance of him like transitioning. But we were not able to pick him up because he was still under investigation back then and was still like blocked from playing in contenders, and so we sadly had to drop our pursuit to pick him up for either Hurricane or trial him for Spitfire back then. But saying it like that, there is definitely a possibility if we are looking for a support player in the future.
I mean, if you went this far, you probably have done your due diligence on the improvement that he has made as a person. Can you speak to that?
We definitely thought that with how he interacted with us and how he like I personally take big pride in like how I speak to people about it and like how honest they are towards me and like how upfront they are about like their mistakes and stuff. And I personally believe that even if players made mistakes in the past, especially if it's like attitude mistakes, that they can improve, which is the thing that like I also was very vocal about with Hafi. And so I had the feeling that he definitely learned about what mistakes he made and like how to better himself as a person. And I would have definitely taken a shot with him. And I would suggest people that are looking into it that it's worth taking him on or like taking a shot for him.
Right. Say maybe even some room in the budget for this season?
Not sure about that one.
Okay.
But he's definitely somebody that people should look into or like look out for.
Sure. Then I suppose let's look a little bit into the future as like a final topic and think about what you want to achieve this season. So, I mean, it's a highly competitive season. I just got done doing power rankings. It's really hard, right? It's hard because it's hard to evaluate contenders' performance in the different regions. We saw what contenders' talent like a Runaway or like an Element Mystic and these all-time great contenders teams, at least from South Korea, can do. The question mark always comes in terms of like how much damage you guys will be able to do as the most dominant European team in contenders of all time. So what is your realistic goal and what are you satisfied with at the end of the day?
I always pride myself about like being good at setting expectations or like not bullshitting people. So I think a realistic goal that we have is like get into some of the seasonal tournaments. That would be great. Like if we can get into 1, 2, or 3 like of those tournament plays. It's not realistic that we're gonna be like I reiterate it again and again. It's not realistic that we're gonna be a top 3 team, and I'm sorry that I like kill the hype of fans because of that. I saw the Reddit threads, guys. I saw it, but it's a realistic goal, and I'm sorry that I crush your dreams, but I would really like us to be like a good middle of the pack team for our first season and like prove that European talent is definitely worth looking into. And basically like providing that path to pro for also the European like contender scene. Like the better we do as a team, And the better we showcase that it's worth picking up that talent, the better it is for the scene as a whole. So that's my main goal. We don't want to start super low, but like people rate us pretty low because they like, of course, we are an unproven team, we are a new team, we are somebody that's like picked up from contenders, so we don't have the big hype that like contenders teams in Korea have. Like when Runaway was picked up, everybody was like raving about it, and we're just like that European team that got picked up, which is totally fine. Like I'm not like mad at anyone who rates us low, but it's like we rather exceed the expectations that the community have, and we show that what we're capable of, rather than like setting the expectations too high and then like dip down on it.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Now, I think some reservations are also in the community in terms of the setup that you have to play with, which is, yes, Blizzard has talked about that they have figured out a way to level the playing field for everyone. And of course, you're going to play across an entire ocean. So the ping won't be amazing. What's the usual ping that you get against teams right now? And do you think that's a big competitive disadvantage for you?
I'm currently practicing towards East Coast servers, of course. So it's server structure in Europe and like in America is very different. Like when you look into like live servers / OPR servers and the Overwatch League servers, I know that Overwatch League servers have like a server that is closer to the East Coast than the live servers have. So of course, like live ping is a tiny bit higher than it will be in the Overwatch League. But we're looking around a ping, I would say like between 90 and 110 is probably like realistic, depending on how far Eastern you are in Europe, of course. Like Reaper will get a bit higher ping than, for example, like Honey gets, but it should be around those range. And it's definitely harder to play on that ping, but it's also like a getting used to it kind of story. There's heroes that are better on lower ping. There's heroes that are like really bad on high ping. Doomfist is a good example for it because you have to have like good reaction time with him. So I don't know how frequently we're going to implement, for example, Doomfist into the meta or like into our play style, but we're definitely working with the coaches to like find workaround to certain metas that will come up.
Right. Now, I just received the phone call from the Scrimbuck Stock Exchange, and the person said you're overdue a payment. So can you give us a little bit of a hint? How are scrims going right now? Are you satisfied with the performance there, or what's going on?
Do I just bust out the nice copy pasta of like scrims are going great? Can wait for the season to start, or
for sure, whatever.
I'm not there in scrims 24/7. Like I see, like I've of course other duties to attend than like sitting in scrims for all of the 3 teams. It would like basically kill my whole day if I would like watch every scrim that we have. But I heard that it's solid. Like I can't really say anything else. Like it's not like we're beating everyone and like we are the top 5 team or something.
Right.
But it's also like we're getting beat by everyone. So important at the end of the day is not how many scrims you win, it's what you get out of them. So
for sure,
scrimbucks are a currency that is very dangerous.
You say that and I gamble it all away still.
That's fine.
Now, okay, so you want to make it to a tournament. Do you think I have a chance to proverbially, and we don't know what that will look like for you, actually, maybe you can talk about it, but go to Hawaii?
Oh, I would love to go to Hawaii.
Okay.
I haven't had vacation in years, dude. No. No, I think it's realistic for us to go to a tournament. I think especially in the early 2 stages, with like how much synergy we have already and how we've shown off in like the Steel Series tournament, for example, it's realistic for us to like get some upsets early on in the season. It definitely will be a challenge to get the team to Hawaii because of all the travel restrictions still.
For
so
sure,
we're working with Blizzard on like how realistic it is and how we can get there. But it would be nice. I mean, who doesn't want to go to Hawaii? Seriously.
For sure, yeah. So Right. I think that concludes the interview. Do you have any other topic that's sort of like burning on your soul that you want to talk about, or do you think is underserved in the community that you want to talk about? Does the community get anything wrong about you guys that you want to set the record straight on? Is anything like this?
Do you think I can trigger the community by saying we're gonna play Blasé on McCree? Like,
right.
I think the Blasé topic in general, I was really disheartened about how the community received the Blasé pickup. In general, like, if your favorite player doesn't get picked up, or like the whole like Dannedd versus Blasé situation, it's always really, really sad to see how the community is bashing on person A just because their favorite other player doesn't get picked up, or like their favorite other player like is in a different state or whatever. I would really like to have, like, of course, like, criticism is something that is very endemic to the esports, especially from the fan base to the managers or to the teams.
Sure.
But don't bash on players, man. Like, it's not their fault that they get picked. Their fault that they get picked up over somebody else. It's just like how they performed and like how the team sees them as an addition to the team. So nobody should get hate for like taking the spot of another player, or like it's not a malicious intent of the player, and they shouldn't be the target of like some harassment.
For sure.
In my opinion. Also, another topic that I would like to point out: support tier 2. Tier 2 is important.
Yeah.
Especially European scene. This is something I talked about recently on Twitter a lot. Is like how the European scene is like leveling up their game currently for like social media, for content, for like how the games are going. Like, I've seen so many people on Twitter in chats and stuff saying like, "Oh, why didn't I watch European contenders before? It's fun to watch," because of course like they're Overwatch content starved, but it's really competitive this season, so it's definitely worth a look if you want to dip into some of those.
Support you too. Good cause. Then we say thank you for the interview and good luck in the season.
Thank you so much for having me. It was fun.
We hope you enjoyed the interview with Noukky. If you want to see more content like this, check out the playlists of this interview series. More Overwatch League content with the start of the league is coming up, and we have some great content in the pipes. So it might be worth your while to hit subscribe, like, and the bell notification for all things esports with GGRecon.